What would you do if you had a long line of attacking Confederates advancing on your position? You realized you couldn't hold where you were kneeling or standing, and there weren't any reinforcements coming to help you. Probably retreat. That would be a safe thing to do. If you retreat, you might live to fight another day, or at least live long enough for the reinforcements to be able to join you and form new battle lines to combat these rebels on the field of fight. Well, today we're going to talk about the second defensive position that the Union troops fall back to during the Battle of Newmarket. I'm Sarah K. Byerly with Gazette 66.5, and today we are talking about the River Road position at the Battle of Newmarket, which was fought on May 15, 1864. So here's the deal, the quick recap. Confederate General John C. Breckinridge has been tasked with defending the Shenandoah Valley. He's pulled together an army against the odds, if you will, and he initially positioned them along Shirley's Hill in the early morning hours of May 15th. He waits, hoping that the Union troops will attack him. Now, for the Union Army, it's a little different. Their army commander, Union General Franz Sigel, was supposed to march up that south in the Shenandoah Valley, take the town of Stanton. He got kind of delayed. That's the short version of the story. You can watch the rest of the campaign videos to get the long version. Basically, by the morning of May 15th, Sigel has a divided army. He has Colonel Augustus Moore in Newmarket, positioned along Manor's Hill, which is just west of town, and Moore is out there with just a couple of units. Sigel has the rest of the main army either 20 miles away or somewhere on the road in between, depending on which unit we're talking about. But either way, Sigel's got a divided army, and it's not going to be a wonderful situation. His men are going to be arriving wet, tired, and hungry on the field at Newmarket, and having to do their very best to fight a defense with moments of offense in this battle. Colonel Moore had actually set up a good defensive position, given the number of troops that he had. He used the south-facing slope of Manor's Hill, and he did such a fine job that when his superior officer in rank, Julius Stall, arrives on the battlefield, Stall doesn't change a thing in the troop deployment. Interestingly, when Sigel finally makes an appearance on the battlefield, we think about midday. One of his officers mentions it was about lunchtime. Now, people eat lunch at different times, so that's pretty vague, but probably about midday, maybe around the time or shortly after that Breckinridge had ordered that advance from Shirley's Hill. Now, Moore and his troops, which will be the 123rd Ohio, the 18th Connecticut, the 1st West Virginia, part of Snow's artillery battery, part of Wincoop's cavalry, and then he had another set of artillery guns, von Kiesler's battery, that had gone into position actually in one of the town's church graveyards. So Moore has cavalry, he has infantry, and he has artillery, but he's not able to hold on to his lines at Manor's Hill, unfortunately for him. About midday, Confederate General Breckinridge orders his troops to advance. His brigade under John Eccles will move along the Valley Pike and along battle line. His brigade under Gabriel Wharton will come over the crest of Shirley's Hill, also in a long battle line connecting with Eccles. It's this big line that's going to sweep the land between the Shenandoah River, approximately, they're not quite to the river yet, but they're moving into that area, and Smith's Creek, and push the Union troops back. And that's what happened. The Union troops didn't just run. They put up a fight, first on their skirmish lines, then by regiment, but they're not able to hold off the Confederate advance. So Moore orders his regimental commanders to pull back to a new defensive position, and it's along this place called River Road. Now, River Road does not run along the river, but it runs to the river. So, we'll take a quick look at a map, and we'll circle the River Road for you to see. basically, as you saw on the map, River Road runs from the town of Newmarket up and over Manor's Hill. This is going to be the farther north part of Manor's Hill, almost to the plateau area. So it runs up and over, then down to the Shenandoah River. Now the Shenandoah River, you have to understand, was used for transporting agricultural product and other commercial products. And we know that Newmarket had some metal work going on there along with some other industries. So River Road is an important transportation link to get to the river, possibly to load items onto barges that are going to use the river to transport them to other markets. So just another avenue that commerce flows in and out of the Shenandoah Valley, and that's going to be the river. So important link in local history, but militarily, the line that Moore establishes along River Road kind of has some problems. In the words of the soldiers, here's what was going on. Major Peel, who was commanding in the 18th Connecticut, so Union unit, he says, the new position of the regiment was unfortunate for its efficiency, being in a lane backed by barns and 2 rows of fences. So basically, the guys are going to be stuck in this new position. He continues, a continuous rain for 5 days had rendered traveling on places other than the road extremely difficult, and the men stood knee-deep in mud. So not only are they getting boxed in by these buildings, they had to deal with mud. As the lane was entered by the flank, so nothing but a flank movement could extricate the regiment. Kind of a problem. Interestingly, the 123rd Ohio Regiment takes up a similar position. So somewhere along River Road, they're getting boxed in by buildings, by other positions, they're getting stuck in the mud. Not a great place that you really want to. Now the Union infantry doesn't really have time to get settled in this new position. It doesn't take long and the Confederates are advancing. The Confederates don't really stop. This is a battle that moves. It doesn't move in blocks like we want to move it on a map. This is a moving fight. So the Union regiments take up this position, but about the time they're getting kind of ready to think about fighting again, the Confederates are already approaching, coming upon this new area, this new defensive line along River Road. Now the 18th Connecticut and the 23rd Ohio are getting artillery support for a little while. Union Artillery Commander Captain von Kiesler had brought 6 artillery pieces to the field, and he sets them up in the graveyard of St. Matthew's Lutheran Church. And he's been shelling the Confederates on Shirley's Hill during the advance and as they're now approaching this new position. However, von Kiesler realizes he's not really sure that these 2 Union regiments are going to be able to hold off this big Confederate advance. So he makes the decision to pull his guns out of the graveyard position and to somewhere he's hoping safer, maybe a little more effective. He pulls out the artillery pieces, but in the process of doing that, he loses 1 gun. There was a large rock that got stuck underneath or in the undercarriage of one of these artillery pieces, and he's forced to abandon one of his cannons somewhere along the Valley Pike. And the infantrymen on this Union line see this happen, and they later write about it in some of their post-war reminiscence. So von Kiesler pulls back, and he'll take part in the fight a couple hours later, but he'll be down to 5 cannons. So he loses 1 gun, and that was serious. An artillery commander would have to answer for the loss of a gun. So von Kiesler, he's starting to have trouble on that day, and he's going to have even more trouble before this battle's over. But we won't jump ahead too far. Now, I like to call the position of the 18th Connecticut and the 23rd Ohio the River Road line, but in reality that makes it sound like they were there, that they made this defense that lasted. Really not. As I mentioned before, Newmarket is a moving fight. It is fluid, it is scary, it is changeable. No sooner do these Union regiments kind of settle into those trapped positions than the Confederates are advancing quick enough that they're going to have to move. Shots are fired, there's definitely fighting going on. Don't think that the Union soldiers aren't putting up resistance. They definitely are, and we see that in the reminiscence. And it was a stiff fight, and the mud is not helping, but our Union boys are forced back. Moore's not happy about that, obviously. No commanding officer is going to be happy about being forced into a retreat. However, he goes and he helps to establish a third defensive line. And that's going to be the one along Bouchon Hill. And by this point in the fight, Franz Sigel has finally arrived on the battlefield. Not quite clear how much of a hand he might have had in the River Road defense, but Sigel is definitely instrumental in getting that third line, that third Union defensive line established. And he also has some units that have not been involved in the fighting coming onto the field. So reinforcements have arrived for the Union soldiers. And even those that have fought this retreating battle up to this point, they weren't done fighting. There's reference to there's still Union flag waving going on, and once they hear that other units have arrived to help them, there's this spirit of enthusiasm. They're going to keep fighting, they're intent on defeating the Confederates. This battle is far from over. But the action along River Road basically is. The 18th Connecticut, 123rd New York are going to need to extricate themselves out of these boxed-in farm lane positions and fall back to this third defensive Union line. So the fight at River Road, to the best of my knowledge, does not last extremely long, but it's significant. It's an action that delays the Confederate advance, forces them to hold on to their own battle line, not fall into disarray, and it's a delay. It's a second position before the final third that will be taken up by Sigel's army. I realized that I got so busy jabbering there that we didn't really take a break to be able to show you some pictures of this area. So let's take a quick moment. First off, you will see some photographs from St. Matthew's churchyard, or cemetery, graveyard. And this is where von Kiesler had his battery during the battle. Obviously there's more tombstones, headstones there than there would have been during the Civil War. There are ones that predate the Civil War that you can see if you visit the location, and also some of the Confederate dead from the Battle of Newmarket were buried in this cemetery. Then you'll see a couple of photos taken from the River Road property recently acquired by Shenandoah Valley Battlefield Foundation, and when we come back we're going to talk about that. Preservation at Newmarket Battlefield. It is quite a story, and I think we'll probably do a whole video segment on it toward the end of this series. But for now, let's talk about River Road, because it's an area that hasn't got a lot of attention in some of the other studies. If you visit Newmarket Battlefield, you'll kind of miss it at this point, but that's probably going to change. Now, one of the preservation challenges and interpretive challenges at Newmarket today is the wonderful Interstate 81. We all love our interstate system, right? I mean, we just get on it and we can drive real quick, get to our next location. It's pretty awesome. But it's not so awesome when it ruins battlefields. And it kind of ruined my battlefield. Interstate 81 cuts right down the middle of what was Newmarket Battlefield. So what you have, if you visit Newmarket today, is you have a wonderful piece of property that is preserved and is Newmarket State Historical Park. And that's operated by the state of Virginia and also Virginia Military Institute. And that piece of land was preserved by George Collins. He was a VMI grad, and it's a wonderful piece of land. It's the core, if you will, of Newmarket Battlefield. But there's more to it than that, and you have to go to the other side of 81 or farther south on the west side to see Manor's Hill, Shirley's Hill. But you'll have to go under 81, use Crossroad, and head into town, then make a left. You'll be on Battlefield most of the way, because Battlefield isn't just wide open spaces where cannons sit in the modern sense. Much of what was Newmarket Battlefield has now been developed, and that's just progress. It happens, but sometimes it can be a little bit unfortunate. However, not to turn this into a rant about development or anything like that, we want to talk about some good news. Shenandoah Valley Battlefield Foundation was able to save land that was on the original River Road line, and that is super exciting. 13.5 acres were preserved and officially secured in the spring of 2018. When I first heard about this preservation effort that was happening at Newmarket, I was already studying the battle, and when you're studying a battle and you find out that land on your battlefield is up for purchase, it can be preserved, so it can be studied and interpreted. As a historian, that is a super exciting moment. I know super exciting is kind of a trendy thing to say, but I'm struggling to find other words to describe it. You want to jump up and down and wave your hands and start the biggest fundraising campaign you can. Sometimes that's not realistic, but I was very delighted to hear this news, and it was a privilege to be able to support the battlefield preservation, make a donation to the best that I could. As an author, we don't always make a lot of money, but being able to get behind it financially to the best that I could, and also reach out to the foundation and find out about this property was something that really thrilled me. Through the work of the foundation and through generous donors who were able to give very large amounts of money, they were able to secure this 13.5 acres along River Road. And that preservation victory was announced in the spring of 2018. I had another trip coming up in the summer of 2018, and I was able to connect with the staff at Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation and ask to go out to this new property. And one of their team members very graciously met me at their offices there in town, and we walked just a few short blocks over, to the property, which stands just adjacent to St. Matthew's Church. I was speaking with some of their staff just a couple weeks ago, and they have plans for preservation, development, and interpretation to be able to happen at that site. If you are planning a trip to Newmarket Battlefield and want to do some further exploration, I would recommend stopping by the Strayer House, which is serving as the headquarters of Shenandoah Valley Battlefield Foundation, and you'll be able to find out if you're able to go out on that property, and what's available to see or those sorts of things. They'll be able to give you an update. It's the River Road property, and not only does this piece of land tell military history, but it's also linked to the battle which is occurring in the town of Newmarket. So by the time the Confederate troops hit the River Road line, they're already passing through the streets of the village of Newmarket. So you have a military conflict raging in a civilian town, in civilian fields, along the civilian farm lane or road, and that's going to be part of the local history, the local story that occurs here at Newmarket, and that's something that the foundation is also committed to highlighting, exploring, interpreting, teaching, and I think that's really important because as much as I am fascinated by military history, I'm also interested in how these military situations, incidents, characters, if we can call them that, historical figures might be the better way to put it, how they interact with the civilian population, residents of a town or farm, and what happens to those people when a battle or military occupation occurs in their area. I'm Sarah K. Byerly with Gazette 66.5. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful and inspired week. Thanks again. Bye-bye.